Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. Today we're going to be with the band because I am doing the banned books tag. Pat from Book Chat with Pat tagged me to do this video, so thank you very much. And it was originally created by Katrina, whose channel is called Ms. Peepers-Reading-Corner. I will make sure to link both of their videos as well as the tag questions down below in the description box in case you're interested in making a response of your own. So I have these questions here on my phone. Let's go ahead and get into it. So here are the prompts. Number 1, do you intentionally read banned books? Why or why not? I had kind of a hard time answering this at first because while I don't know that I have necessarily sought out books specifically because they were banned, it just so happens that a lot of books I have sought out maybe for other reasons are frequently banned and challenged. So I've never specifically gone, I want to read all of the books that have been banned in this year or whatever. But I do recall when I was in high school and I was kind of trying to do a lot of studying for college entrance exams and stuff like that. I found a list on the College Board website, which if you're not from the US, very briefly, the College Board is a company that produces a standardized test that most American high schoolers planning on going to college are expected to take at least a couple of times. And your score can kind of impact what schools you can get into as well as the kind of financial aid you're offered. And they had a list that was something like 100 classic books that you need to read to be like a well-rounded person or something like that. And I'm like, well, I want to be a well-rounded person. And quite a few of those books on that list had been banned or challenged within even the last decade within the United States. So I have intentionally set out to read certain books, but I don't know that it's ever been because they were banned. Number 2, tell us about your favorite banned book. Let's see. Okay, I have a good one for this. I'll be right back. So this book I have credited as being a book that quite literally saved my life. It changed my life when I found it on a shelf at Ada's Technical Books and Cafe in Seattle, Washington. I began reading it and my eyes filled with tears because I recognized myself in a book in a way that I haven't really that much before or since. It was just so moving and felt like the author was speaking directly to me. And that is Genderqueer, which is a graphic memoir by Maya Kobabe. This is a Stonewall Honor book. It is written for, I believe, a teenager and up audience, and it is about the author's experience of coming into her gender identity as genderqueer and her sexuality as well. This book within the last, 2 or 3 years has been increasingly targeted by a lot of virulent right-wing hate groups within the United States in particular. And they basically don't want anyone to be able to read this book. They say because it's inappropriate and pornographic. That is usually the kind of charge that is leveled against queer and trans writers who are writing about their experiences. They say that it is, indecent for children to read. Again, this is not really a book that I would read with a 5-year-old or something like that, but the type of indecency they're talking about is an anecdote about the author growing up and playing outside in the woods without a shirt on, or talking about her first experience going to see a gynecologist. I mean, these are facts of life that are part of the author's story and experience, and, pornography is designed to arouse and titillate and not really have that much else sort of artistic or plot-wise going on. So I think that, that is... At my most generous, I'd say that's a disingenuous critique, but I think at my most accurate, I'd say that's just bigoted. Anyways, I love this book. I recommend it to so many different people. I have really enjoyed following along this author's career, and yeah, it's a book that when the deluxe edition here, that was the hardcover, came out, I actually went and purchased a second copy because I love it so much. Number 3 is to share a story about book banning. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to say for this, and like a story about this from like my own life. I've been pretty lucky that my parents are both very like open-minded people that value education and learning. They never really told us any sort of book was off limits to us. I think like the furthest they went in terms of like guiding our reading choices was like there were a couple times I wanted to read books that I was maybe a little too young for the material of, and my mom very kindly suggested you might want to wait a couple of years before you read, say, Memoirs of a Geisha, because I was getting very into historical fiction at the time, but I was kind of young, honestly, for the amount of like sex on the page that is in that book. And I was like, okay, I'll wait. And I waited a couple years, and I'm kind of glad I did, because I think at that time, I just didn't really have like the maturity to really appreciate that part of the storytelling. And it also probably was something I wouldn't have wanted to read at that age. But they never banned us or outright forbade us from reading anything. However, I did grow up in the Bible Belt in the United States. So there was a lot of controversy at different points throughout my childhood and education where people were either, if not banning books outright, challenging them or making a big stink about not allowing their children to participate in certain class activities. I remember the Harry Potter series being the first sort of controversial book that I remember people talking about in school. And like this was way back when the books were first coming out. Like I was in elementary school at the time. But I remember there was a lot of sort of discussion and parents and other students trying to shame me or other children that were reading the Harry Potter series, saying that we were reading books that were satanic, that we were participating in black magic by doing this. And I don't remember this because, again, I was in like the second grade. I don't think they succeeded in getting those books pulled from the library or anything like that. But I do remember there was a part of our class where we were watching an interview with the author, and some of the kids got pulled out of the class because their parents specifically did not want them hearing her read from the book. And that's kind of ironic because now, again, I wouldn't advocate for banning them, but I have absolutely no interest in rereading those books or supporting the author in all of her views and opinions that she has. No thank you. But yeah, I do remember encountering that. I remember encountering some really negative reactions from other children at a Halloween party that I went to because I was dressed up as Hermione. And again, there were a lot of like accusations of this is Satanism, this is black magic, you need to go change your costume. So people were definitely responding to parts of the books that were challenging their beliefs and their ideals and challenging what other children in the classroom or in the social group should or shouldn't be able to do. Again, I don't really think that ever went anywhere, but that was certainly in the ether. And then I did go to high school in a pretty conservative area of my city, and I do remember there were a lot of people. So my high school, I have talked about this a couple times before. I did not do traditional high school where I went to like high school with 9th through 12th grade. I did a dual enrollment program, so I got to enroll in classes at a local community college and take those there with the people who were like 18 years old and up. And the sort of book banning thing in a very conservative area really was just a lot about students that were trying to openly challenge the teachers in class, or I guess outside of class, so much so that we had to have discussions about it beforehand, because they didn't want to read certain Shakespeare books or certain Shakespeare plays because there was sex or like implied nudity in them, or they didn't want to read things that contradicted their own personal religious beliefs. And to be fair, I mean, like, I'm not here to knock people for what their religious beliefs are, but I believe that is like a private matter between you and whoever your, spiritual leader and your conscience is, and that the minute that you try to make that other people's business by dictating what other people can and can't read because it goes against your own religion, That's no good. I mean, part of education is that you are supposed to be exposed to ideas and opinions and life experiences that are different from your own. And part of education is figuring out what you do when you're confronted with that type of difference. Do you respond by shutting down and not allowing any new information in, or do you try and wrestle with some of your own intolerance or your own uncomfortability because of these stories that you read? I just don't ever think that the answer is we should not talk about this or we should not discuss this, or because I disagree with it, no one can. That being said, I mean, this book banning conversation also goes into the fact that, like, there is a time and a place for certain types of discussions, and not every type of discussion is necessarily permissible or productive in a classroom setting. So I'm, not saying that we should be sitting here debating Nazis about who gets to count as a person, but I am saying that, it is important to, say, read these primary texts. Like, I'm thinking of the courses I took in college about the Holocaust. It is important to read the primary texts from that time period and study them and understand them. And I think when we ban books, we just shut ourselves off from the full gamut of the human experience, and that's just no good. It's not educational, it's not democratic, it's not fair to people that want to practice engaging with these different ideas. Number 4, which book would you memorize to save it from the censors, a la Fahrenheit 451? I loved this question, and I love the book Fahrenheit 451. If you hadn't read it, it's, I guess, not too much of a spoiler to say that it is a world in which the main character is a fireman, and the firemen actually go around and burn books when people call 911 and report that they're in. The government is very vested in it being a post-literate society, and it's much more of a television broadcast society. But there's a group of people that have kept book culture alive by each person in this group has memorized an entire book, and that's how they're keeping the ideas in the books alive after the books themselves have been burned. So I think what I would memorize to save from the censors is actually The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. It kind of ticks a few different boxes for me. It's one of my favorite stories by one of my favorite authors. I think it's a very valuable literary work that merits returning to again and again, and I think it is a work that both during the time it was published and in our time today still challenges us and broadens our horizons when we read it. It broadens our scope of what we can think about and imagine with regards to culture, to gender, to what intimacy actually means, and it's great. I really, really love The Left Hand of Darkness, so that's the one I'm memorizing. Number 5, are there any books that challenge your opinions on book banning? Be honest and tell us more. This one is easy for me to answer. No. I mean, there are definitely books that sort of make me articulate my more nuanced thoughts on book banning, but I'm still against book banning. I am pro things like selecting age-appropriate texts for school classrooms, for library collections. I think it is important that those libraries or collections are curated by experts, but the fact of the matter is these people are trained and have advanced degrees and literally study how to build out a collection or thing like that. And I get really frustrated for many reasons with book banners, but also because there's such a culture of disrespecting the expertise and education that goes into the work that teachers and librarians do to be able to develop their classroom libraries or their school library collections. I've been asked about this before because I've worked in different bookstores in different parts of the country with very wildly different politics, both of the customers and the staff. And I've had to sell plenty of books that I don't like and that I find the contents kind of abhorrent and disagreeable. But it's at the same time not really my place to say to someone, you can't read this. And I, again, don't really think that there's much of merit that comes out of just outright banning books. I think it's far more productive and helpful and interesting, and also more humanistic, I guess, to have discussions about these things and to talk about why certain books may not be making it into, say, an AP literature course anymore that once did, or talk about the ways in which like social mores have changed the way we react to words in books over time. That's always, to me, going to be like 1,000 times more fruitful than just banning the book and closing your mind. And frankly, the ultimate goal of these bans, which is to deprive anybody else who has access to that collection of books access to the banned text. And that is the number one reason why I am against book banning, is because it hurts people who are least able to independently afford books, meaning people who are like seniors, children and youth, people with lower incomes who are not just able to go buy the banned book and read it and figure out what it's all about. People living in rural areas or areas for whatever reason don't have access to a lot of like bookstores or libraries, or things like that. And that's who book banning is really designed to hurt and target. Always going to be against that. And honestly, I don't think there's a book that could change my mind about that. Yeah, so I think that's going to do it for the banned books tag. Please, if you saw this video and you liked it and you want to chat more about it, you can either chat with me in the comments or make the video yourself if you are a video making kind of person here on BookTube. I would love to hear what some of your favorite banned books are, so leave them in the comments. We can get a conversation going there. As always, thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.